Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the show, artificial intelligence is advancing quickly, touching everything from infrastructure to healthcare.
We'll spend time with a perspective that doesn't dismiss the risks, but argues the benefits are being overlooked, even as communities push back against AI's physical footprint.
Then we'll turn to design as a form of care. In Detroit, a simple but radical idea, a coat that doubles as a sleeping bag, has become a model for responding to homelessness and creating jobs.
And we'll end in culture, asking how this city is portrayed when others tell its story. From cult classics to Hollywood dramas, we'll look at which films reflect Detroit and which ones flatten it.
Today's show tackles technology, creativity, and representation, and how choices made today shape how people live, work, and are seen. This is the Metro.
We begin with artificial intelligence, already shaping daily life, whether we're ready or not. That's brought cause for celebration and concern. It's reducing the work we do, helping us find answers more quickly. And some research suggests it has strong capabilities to diagnose illness, perhaps better than doctors. But the rise of AI is also accompanied by pessimism and fear. Jobs could be taken and never replaced. Our loneliness could deepen, and research suggests our critical thinking abilities are already degrading. Some of these concerns are the context for opposition to data centers. Those spaces house and advance artificial intelligence, and many don't want them in their backyards. In Monroe and Kalamazoo counties, there's been pushback, which has permanently delayed the creation of data centers there. In Saline, many are unhappy about a center planned for the area. All of this is happening after Wayne State officially opened its own AI research center in October. Ezemenari Obasi is the vice president for research and innovation at Wayne State and heads the university's Institute for AI and Data Science. Producer Sam Corey spoke with him about the promise and perils of AI.
Why did Wayne State want to open an artificial intelligence center? What will happen there?
Yeah, so I think, as you could imagine, AI is a big conversation in the country at the moment. There's a lot of government investments in AI, and I think we saw it as an opportunity to leverage technology to accelerate some of our scientific breakthroughs on campus. I think what kind of makes our approach a little different is that we're not just focused on the science of AI, although we are doing some work in that space, but also focused on the application of AI into other sectors on campus so that it can be a tool that folks can use to accelerate breakthroughs no matter what they're studying.
Tell me a little bit about those breakthroughs. What do you imagine AI really helping other facilities, other research at Wayne State, and other practicalities outside of the university with?
Yeah, so I think when you think about AI, I mean, we also think about it from a big data standpoint, right? Like, how do you take an awful lot of information and do something meaningful with that? And so we do a lot of work in the health space, as an example. And so when you have data that can be taken from the cloud, data that's taken from, direct services, data taken from medical records, how do you bring all that stuff together in order to have a sense of what's causing people to not live as long or to not have a good quality of life? And I think as an individual investigator, there's only so much we can do with our basic statistical tools. But when you have big language models that can sort of go deeper dive into bigger data sets, it allows you to uncover things that you might have missed. And so we see that as being a game changer for us.
So it's making knowledge a little bit more efficient. How do you use AI in your life? How does it show up?
That's a good question. I think originally I was one of those folks that were like, AI, I don't know about that, right? And is this actually listening to me right now on my phone? And, is this what's generating Alexa, accidentally turning on when I didn't even say her name, right? And so I think at first I had some hesitancy in sort of using it, but now I see it as a very easy tool to sort of speed up things that I do even as a parent. Like I have a son who plays basketball. And sometimes I wonder, well, what can I do to get him to be more efficient in his shooting? Or what can I do to help his ball handling skills? Plug that into Gemini, and you get a whole program of how you could sort of deal with the psyche of it, various skills that he can work on in the household, things that you could probably come up with if you spent, a couple of hours thinking about it. But wow, to be able to just ask that question and get some really good answers in a matter of seconds, I think is a game changer.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different concerns with AI, and we'll get to them in a bit. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, what are the biggest ethical concerns with AI?
So I think, as people, we all have our biases. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so AI is built by people. And so whatever biases those folks have, who knows if that showed up in their code, as they begin to develop their language models. I think the ethics piece is something that's extremely important to us, which is one of the interesting projects that our new AI Center is working on, is basically how to teach AI to unlearn some of those things that you don't want it using in future algorithms and whatnot. And so you can do corrective work in order to undo some of those biases that are uncovered.
Yeah, can you give an example of that? I think that's noteworthy.
Yeah, so, you can have, let's say, in the medical space, right, there could be a certain dose bias that a doctor might have based on a person's characteristics. And then you can say, oh my goodness, we realize that that's not a correct way of going about this. And so you can program it to not use the same data that it's sort of sourced to come up with that outcome. You can give it corrective information, and then it can learn from that so that future applications doesn't translate that same bias moving forward.
I want to talk to you about data centers because they are really important in the realm of AI, and they're coming up a lot in Michigan right now. And a lot of people are very opposed to them. Just from your perspective and from the center's perspective, are data centers important? Like, do y'all care about data centers? And if so, why?
Yeah, so data centers are important because you have to have an infrastructure to house an awful lot of data. So something has to house that. I think getting into the business of how we house it and where we house it, that becomes, very place-centered.
So essentially, if we didn't have data centers, if we weren't on this approach to build data centers, then will we no longer be able to use AI, or we wouldn't be able to use it? We wouldn't be able to expand it? Like, what does it look like if we don't do that?
So I think you're basically limited to your desktop, as an example. There's only so fast that your desktop can work. There's only so much information it can hold. And so something that a large data center can probably process in seconds, you might be taking weeks and months to process in a much slower capacity machine.
This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Sam Corey, speaking with Ezemenari Obasi. He is the Vice President for Research and Innovation at Wayne State University and is heading the university's AI Institute. When it comes to data centers, a lot of people are very concerned that they have no control in the process and outcome of them. They see these big companies coming in, trying to set up shop, but those companies not really caring about water usage, not really caring about the environment and what will happen to our air. They don't really care about energy prices going up, and they don't really care about creating more jobs. That's just kind of lip service. And they believe that because over the past decade or two, they've seen corporations do things that they don't like, and they haven't really been able to hold them accountable. Companies, especially more recently, social media companies, taking people's data and selling them to other places and other advertisers, other companies, and them not knowing it. In terms of these data centers being created, what do you want the companies to be doing so they are more geared toward the public good?
Yeah, I think in general, just doing things to generate profit isn't always what's in our best interest. And doing things without community buy-in also is not necessarily in our best interest. And so for me, what would be awesome is sort of what I think we do from a R&D standpoint at Wayne State is to have a community engaged approach. Have some stakeholders that represent a wide range of voices within the community that may not agree with you. Let them be part of a planning committee to kind of here's the strategy, be very transparent, because sometimes many of these things are a function of just lack of transparency and honesty. And if you're transparent and people have an opportunity to engage that transparency, they can feel a little bit more optimistic that they're going to get something that actually is meaningful and in alignment with what they want to see in their neighborhoods. Doing things in a black box, not communicating, only being profit driven is no good model for any sector.
These data centers are hitting home in Michigan in really big ways. As I'm sure you're aware, people are generally very unhappy with them. They're concerned that energy prices will go up and that too much of our water is being used to cool them down, and that ultimately they won't benefit from them, that meant jobs really won't be created. A lot of people won't be working there. In Monroe and Kalamazoo counties, there's been a ton of pushback, which has maybe permanently delayed the creation of data centers there. And in Saline, a lot of residents are unhappy about a data center that is planned to run in that area. What do you make of these concerns from folks?
I think people have every right to raise, valid questions. I would wonder if something big was coming in my neighborhood, what impact would that have on my day-to-day life? And so I think asking questions is healthy. I think they deserve to get really good responses to those questions and whatnot. Part of where I have concern is sometimes we have ulterior motives that sort of fuel fear that isn't necessarily grounded, right? And so we live in the state of Michigan where the Great Lakes is a very treasured entity and nobody wants to see them dry out over a data center, right? But it doesn't have to be an either-or model. There are other ways of leveraging cooling systems. There are other ways of managing energy that doesn't affect the grid and things of that nature. Now, I don't know what's being proposed, by the folks that are trying to put up these data centers. But I do know that there are alternate ways of building them to address, consumer, concerns. One of our grand challenges is environmental sustainability. We care a lot about the environment. We don't want something bringing in pollutants, things raising prices, affordability, like all those things matter. And so I think it's a good job to do due diligence. Sometimes slowing down and being able to address public concern is good in the long term, because you do want to have buy-in for whatever you're building.
I mean, it seems like even if it does get buy-in, like prices for sure will go up. I think there's a question of how much water will be used, and I think it really depends on each project. But yeah, prices, it seemed like, will go up because these are just energy-sucking machines. They really need a lot of energy. It sounds like you are concerned about prices going up, but it sounds like you would also say collectively we should be paying for that. Not necessarily that the poorest of us should be hit the hardest, but that this investment is worth it. Like, we don't want to miss out on this investment. Is that fair?
So I'm not even convinced prices will go up without seeing the details of how it'll be built out, right? And so I've seen some models where, literally you can go on your phone and open up Gemini, an AI tool, and ask the question, like, are there ways of building a data center that doesn't increase electric prices and things of that nature? And I think there are models where they can sort of build things that are sustainable, build things that use renewable energy, build things that actually help to stabilize the grid, build things that use sort of the cold. It's cold outside right now, right? Open up windows and other things to sort of have another source of cooling that isn't necessarily water-based. And so I think there is a range of options that could actually, I've seen some scenarios where it could lower costs if done, effectively. But it's hard to sort of make the case without seeing the details, right, of what's being proposed and how it's going to be set up.
Before going deeper into some of the concerns, because there are other concerns that people have about AI, and I'm sure you're familiar with at least some of them, but I do want to steelman the case for AI a little bit more. Yeah. When you look at the possibilities here, when you look at what this can do and how this can benefit humanity, what comes to mind? I mean, the easiest thing that comes to mind, the closest thing, is biotechnology, maybe creating vaccines and other sort of medical tools more quickly, tracking diseases faster, and that kind of thing. What do you imagine when you think about all the things that this can do? What comes to your mind?
I actually believe it could benefit every sector.
Every sector.
Every sector could benefit from it. I even think about, autonomous driving as an example. There's going to have to be some AI capability for it to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, run a bunch of models in real time, and keep you safe while you're driving, right? I think the medical space is also a very good model of how long does it take for us to actually do drug discovery? How long does it take to actually go through the red tape of approvals, where you can sort of build these digital models that can sort of forecast, here's how this could work. Here are some of the things we are concerned of. And so you can save a lot of time in the R&D space in order to turn scientific breakthroughs into community benefit. And so I don't know that there's a single sector that will gain the most, but what I would argue is that avoiding AI as a potential tool will slow down our capacity to both innovate and to lead in some of these international conversations.
Yeah. I want to get to some of these other concerns that I was referencing or alluding to. One of them is hallucinations, that AI makes up answers and isn't providing good information. One example, I know actually of multiple examples of people in my life who have tested AI and have been like, no, you gave me this answer. I actually think this is wrong. And the AI will go, oh, yeah, you're right. But that's great that they did that. But what that tells me is that a lot of people are using it and aren't doing that and might be getting really bad information. What's your concern about hallucinations in AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think nothing is perfect, right? We can pick a topic, and I could probably show you scientific articles that argue both sides of that based on data, right? And so, what I appreciate about recognizing that hallucinations exist is that it puts some onus on you to do some due diligence, right? And so you can sort of ask questions like, I'm not sure about that. Have you considered this? And then it sort of rerun its models to sort of adjust towards that. And so I also know that there are ways in which you can have sort of closed loop conversations in an AI setting where you say, I only want you to consider information from these sources in order to interpret, an answer to a question that I have, so that you control the sources of information that it's leveraging versus it going anywhere it wants to go. I also think it's good practice, just like if you're writing a paper for a class or something, right? Ask it, what are your sources? And then actually go to those primary sources and ensure that what it's pulling from is actually accurate information that it's giving you. And so I think you always need to do due diligence. You can take someone's word for anything these days, and without cross-checking it, you can, put yourself in a vulnerable situation.
But all of this means that people need to actually do that work and be trained to do that work, which I'm not sure we are being trained to do collectively in our schools at this moment.
I would actually agree, because I think we're in that early stage of adoption where the fear part is overriding how do we do this effectively. We absolutely will need to get to a place where people can say, hey, this is a tool no different than a scientific calculator, as an example. How do we use it effectively? How do we do due diligence? How do we still make sure that we cite the appropriate sources and sort of use this in an effective way? Mm-hmm. I think even for the K through 12 environment, this is a space where I think a lot of growth can happen if we normalize it as being okay and teach our kids effective strategies of using it in order to facilitate their studying and learning versus, that's cheating or you're not doing the work that we're asking you to do. I think that creates hesitancy.
A lot of people are not actually doing the work. They're relying on ChatGPT to do the work for them. There are many reports of students not being able to do math problems or write essays. As an example, a new report found that 900 students at UC San Diego couldn't fully meet middle school math standards. People are reading books a lot less than they used to. There are big concerns about people not thinking because they can just use ChatGPT to think for them. I've been in Wayne State classes, I'll say, where people are using ChatGPT to write essays for them. What do you make of these concerns? What do you make of the things that we need to be doing to prevent people to encourage people to actually think, to use this as a tool, but not as an excuse for learning and thinking and exploration?
Yeah, I think about my background. My first degree was in physics, which is very math-based. And at that time, there was a lot of controversy of how do you use graphing calculators? How do you use, these calculators that have the capacity to automate things versus knowing how to do it by hand? And at that time, we sort of had a both-and approach. You had to learn how to do it by hand. And once you've demonstrated that skill set, then you use the calculator to accelerate how you can do it in faster ways and across more complex scenarios. And so there is no substitute for some of the basic things like how to read, how to do math. Like those fundamentals have to be there.
Yeah.
I do think there may be ways of thinking of how do we leverage AI to come up with more tailored ways of learning, because not everyone learns the same way. And are there ways in which we can figure out, okay, this person has a challenge in this particular area. How can we leverage AI to get through that space so that then they can have that competency? People, find shortcuts across the board even before AI came out. So AI is not the reason why people are trying to find a shortcut here and there. Sometimes they're just overloaded with other things.
No, but it does make the shortcut a little easier. Certainly easier than it used to be.
Sure. But, people have found ways to creatively cheat on exams for the longest of time, right? And so I think if we normalize it, if we provide a context that shows here are ethical and effective ways of using it, because yes, I can write an essay right now, and I can. Let me back up. I can just think about my own scenarios, right? Like if I'm writing a caption for my son's basketball, that's one way in which I can think of it. I could put that same caption into Gemini and say, hey, is there a better way of capturing this to sort of reach this particular audience, right? And it gives me 5 options to think of. And so to me, that's using it as a tool to strengthen what I want to communicate for a very specific audience versus saying, hey, can you write something on your own that I think that I could adopt, right? You still have to feed it the information. You still have to tell it what your audience is if you want to be effective.
And so what you're saying is we need to be teaching the fundamentals. People need to be learning a bunch of skills, and then it's got to be used in very specific ways. It can't be used as a replacement. It needs to be used to facilitate a lot of learning, a lot of knowledge creation, a lot of exploration, and to your point, in every single topic in every industry that we have, really.
Absolutely.
That was the Metro's Sam Corey speaking with the head of Wayne State's new AI Center, Ezemenari Obasi. It's the Metro on WDET. Up next, we'll continue this conversation about artificial intelligence and Wayne State's new AI Research Center. Stay with us. Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Artificial intelligence is exciting for some and frightening to others. Love it or hate it, it's been expanding in Detroit with a new AI research center that opened in October. Why did Wayne State invest in this? And what does it hope AI will bring about? That's what the Metro's Sam Corey asked Ezemenari Obasi, the head of the university's new Institute for AI and Data Science. Here's the rest of their conversation.
In terms of loneliness, I think this is another concern. A number of folks are using AI as therapists. They're using it as companionship. Sometimes they're using it for romantic partnership. This looks to be very much the movie Her. I don't know if you've seen it. Essentially where people start dating in AI, you could say. Does this concern you? And do you think we should have some boundaries over this? We live in a time when people are much lonelier than in the past in general, and they're not hanging out and seeing other people. It's much easier just to tune out into your phone. Social media is a really big example, but artificial intelligence is another one now. Are you concerned about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are going to be concerns for anything that we consume. If we go with the medical example, right, people using AI for diagnostic reasons or mental health reasons and things of that nature. Well, before then, people were using WebMD. Before then, people were just asking a friend. There's no substitute from actually engaging a professional in that space.
But you couldn't interact with it. I do want to push you on this a little bit more because you couldn't interact with WebMD the same way. With ChatGPT, people really feel like they're interacting with it in a different way than they were with WebMD.
So it's easy to say that now that you have AI as an option. But when AI didn't exist, WebMD was the big interactive thing that you got information that you felt confident about. And because that's all you knew that was possible at that moment in time. Now, when we look backwards, we could say, oh, that was pretty static. That's like black and white versus color HD TV, right? When all we had was black and white, you didn't know what you were missing. You didn't know there was a whole other level to that engagement. And so as AI becomes more sophisticated, yeah, things will be a lot more interactive, but that could also be a good thing. Because now you can ask more nuanced questions that maybe the old way of going about getting information can provide you. You can ask more tailored information, like, have you taken into consideration this factor, and have you considered this factor? Like, to me, that interactive piece can lead to a more precise outcome if used, appropriately, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that we have to be responsible in any ways in which we consume information.
If I'm hearing you right, it seems like it's important to you that people understand the limits of AI, of what it can do, but also what it can't do, what it can't replace. And people really need to be educated on that front.
No, absolutely. It's not foolproof. As I stated earlier, it's created by people, right? It's going to have its limitations. And you have to do your due diligence in order to maximize the return on that engagement.
I want to talk to you about one more concern, which is people losing their jobs. This is a really big concern that people have. It is always true when new technology comes up, but this is another really big wave of this. Already, a lot of recent college grads have been struggling to find work because a lot of entry jobs have been going away. Since 2023, there has been a 35% decrease in entry-level job postings in America. What do you make of the idea that AI is replacing work and that we won't necessarily replace that work that it's taking away with other things that are meaningful that people want to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm sold on that as being 100% true, because I think anytime you have new technological advancements, there's opportunities for a wider range of job opportunities for folks, right? And so as we develop AI as a tool, we also need to think about what's the appropriate workforce development that should accompany this tool. Because if you're building applications, but you're not building a workforce to sort of leverage it, that's when you sort of have that gap between opportunities for having gainful employment versus being replaced, right? I think there were times when people thought, having self-checkouts will replace folks working at retail or in a grocery stores, and that wasn't the case. It allowed you to deploy limited resources in a more efficient way. But you also needed training to learn how to use self-checkout and how that would change the model of delivering services and whatnot. And so I think there's an opportunity to build a much deeper workforce, both on the technology side and the application side, that currently doesn't exist, that will allow us to be an international competitor in this conversation.
What will those people be doing? I'm actually thinking of a job that did get taken away that never got replaced with something else, which is the bank teller. We just have a lot fewer bank tellers now. When you talk about having a really strong workforce on the technology side, what I'm hearing there is a lot more people going to college and getting grad degrees, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I think that would be quite interesting. But that's what I'm hearing. And so there would be a lot more folks moving into the knowledge base where they would be interacting with AI in different ways. Is that what you imagine, or do you imagine something else?
I also think there could be trade school opportunities, things that you can get from junior community college training as well, right? I think of, back in time when you would see like ITT Tech as an example, or you can go to a 1 or 2 year schooling to be a mechanic, or, and so forth. Like, I think there can be certain skill sets that can be developed in a short period of time that does not require a 4-year degree or an advanced degree. But it does require a 1 or 2 year sort of specialized training that can be of utility, right? And so what those specific areas are, I would imagine, is it's wide open based on what different corporations might need in their applications of it. So if you need someone that's building models, that's a different skill set than someone that is tweaking something versus someone that's applying something versus someone that is thinking of the next big idea. I think there's a wide range of skill sets that can be developed, and obviously the more complex things are going to require more education. But I don't think it requires a bachelor's degree in order to be certified to leverage AI as a gainful employment.
This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Sam Corey speaking with Ezemenari Obasi. He is the Vice President for Research and Innovation at Wayne State University. For a truck driver, let's say, who drives across the country, that's their job.
Sure.
Their job in 5 years, hypothetically, gets replaced because of AI, where now the cars drive themselves. What would you say to that person about what they should do or about how they should pivot? What do you think should happen if that occurs? And I know that's a big question, but I think this matters because I do think a lot of folks are really concerned, and not just them, it goes all the way up to computer programmers, interestingly enough. There's a lot of people that are really concerned that their jobs will be taken away. And I wonder if you have conversations with other people, like, what do you say? Do you say, well, we need to collectively create jobs that, use AI in particular ways that are part of the trade school system? Like, what do you think about when you think of these scenarios?
Yeah, I mean, I if I take it out of the AI space, I think everyone could benefit from being a lifelong learner. If you stop learning, no matter what your occupation is, you may be outdated very quickly and things will evolve and you'll have a hard time finding your place in that future. Whether you're an academic to a truck driver, you kind of need to stay on the cutting edge of how is my profession developing across time? Where is it going? What skill sets do I need in order to sort of remain valuable in that space? And do I even get joy out of doing this, right? So some parts of the question could be, maybe there's another opportunity out there that's a little bit more fulfilling and more passion-driven that you can, consider. But ultimately, I think we all have to consider being lifelong learners if we don't want to sort of fall by the wayside as things evolve.
This is an experiment we're sort of in right now with AI, and I know you're trying to, in your work, you're trying to get ahead of the experiment. You're trying to make sure more people are prepared for this experiment, for this project. We don't know how AI will change us. I guess if this all goes well, if your perfect scenario comes to being in Michigan, what are the things that we're doing? What are the things that we're investing in? What are the ways that we're pivoting alongside this? Like, paint me a picture of something a little bit beautiful, a little bit utopic that has AI, if not in the center, at least as a big piece of it.
Yeah. So, I think about some of the research grant challenges that we're focused on at Wayne State. And if we look at healthcare, right, how do we maximize a person's longevity? How do we maximize a person having a high quality of life? Being able to leverage AI to figure out answers to why people in the city of Detroit live less than folks in other parts of the state of Michigan, to me, that's groundbreaking. When we think about sustaining our environment, whether it's our fresh water, reducing pollution, thinking about some of the buildings that have things in them that are harmful to our health, how do we leverage AI to figure out what those things are, to eliminate those things in order to have a cleaner air to breathe and cleaner water to drink and things of that nature? I think in a perfect world, the state will care about being competitive in this space. We'll figure out how to navigate some of the ideological differences that exist so people can feel comfortable with what our strategy might be moving forward. I think thinking about how to revolutionize K-12 education so that our reading levels and our math levels aren't where they are. I think there's just so many opportunities to really transform challenges that have been existent for decades in a positive way. And so that's what I hope that we can do as a partner in some of these difficult conversations. Even mobility, right? We're hearing that, some industries are moving away from EVs, as an example.
Yeah, Ford right now decided to cancel its EV F-150.
Yeah, and so obviously automobiles is a huge thing in the state of Michigan, right? In the city of Detroit. Yeah. But then what's the alternative so that we don't become extinct in that sort of conversation, right? We've already started thinking about electrifying the roads. How do we do that so that people aren't left behind if you can't afford it, and so forth? I think there's a lot of rich opportunities to lead in these spaces, to find that model that will work, that will catch on. because that's sort of what it's made Detroit, its legacy is being the first to figure some of these very difficult things out that then the rest of the world benefits from, right? I mean, there were times where the idea of sitting in a machine that can take you from point A to point B didn't make sense, right? The notion that I can talk to someone that's not in front of me didn't make sense at a point, right? And so sometimes we have to think really outside of the box, be creative, take that chance, be leaders in that space, and I think the world would benefit from our genius.
Ezemenari Obasi is the Vice President for Research and Innovation at Wayne State University and heads the university's Institute for AI and Data Science. He spoke with Metro producer Sam Corey. It's the Metro on WDET. We've been discussing AI and data centers. Coming up next, we'll hear about why many Michiganders don't want to see those data centers in their backyards. That's next on the Metro. Stay with us.